Alright guys, today I'm going to show you how to do the animated cel shaded look in all of our favorite anime movies and TV shows. So step one is line art. Basically you want to have really clean line art, and for most anime shows they really use really thin lines. I don't know if you noticed, but they're not really thick lines. When you draw in most of your drawings, say if they're traditional or digital, that most likely you're using a thicker line than they are in most of your favorite animated TV shows. And yeah, I've noticed that they're probably even thinner than the lines that I'm using right here in this drawing. They're quite thin, and that's what I've noticed when I was doing this video and kind of doing a little bit of research. But for some reason it looks really good still. So yeah, I try to use a thin line, and I didn't want to go any thinner. I just wasn't used to it, and I'll probably practice later on. But for now, for this video, I think these lines they kind of serve their purpose. So here I am, just kind of going into a time lapse, and just getting these lines down. And remember, when you're going over your lines, they don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be completely matched up. Just, and sometimes you can even improve upon your sketch. I mean, that's kind of what a rough draft sketch is meant to be. So right here, we have this little gap right here where we have this little bands on his elbow. And you see that little gap right there? What you want to do is you want to make sure you close up that gap, because once you start the paint layer under these final lines, you're basically, see right there, you got to close your line gaps. Because if you don't, what happens is when you add your paint layer under these lines, you're going to add a bunch of, color into, say you drag and drop your paint into say the arm area right here. You're going to try to fill it up, or if you use a selection, it's just going to fall out of that line, that gap, because you didn't close it up. That's just how it works. Just imagine if you had a hole in a can, you got to patch that hole up, you know what I mean, or it's going to fall out, or that's a bad analogy, but you get my point. So in all your lines, you got to just take a real close look and see if you closed them up. So we kind of skipped over, so I can just get the last little details. They're not important, you already know how to do your lines. So just making sure, spend a few moments and go over your drawing and see what else do you want to add. You want to add a few more details. I really try to make this look like the Dorohedoro anime, because I really love that. So I did that. So the step 2 is to paint layer under your line art. So you want to add that layer and name it. Name it the paint layer. And I'm kind of having trouble right there. So name it the paint layer. Always don't ever skip naming your layers, because you're just gonna have so much trouble later on finding that layer. Especially if you have more than, say, 10-15 layers, you got to scroll through them. No, if you add your name right then and there, you'll be fine. So here we're going over to the selection tool, and we're trying to select outside of the lines. So I'm selecting the background, and then I'm going to invert it. But here's a little problem I run into. We're going to do a close-up. I'm having trouble. It's going into the hair, and it's not supposed to. It's supposed to do the whole background. But see that little gap right here in his hair, in the back of his hair? I had to close that gap up because the selection was flowing into his hair, and we don't want that. And that's why it's so important, like I said. You have to close up your gaps in your lines. You have to go over your drawing and make sure all those gaps are cleared. So we're getting a really fine selection in this background right now. And you see I'm even getting those extra little pixels right there. And so I went too far. The threshold was too far. So that's perfect right there. So at this point, we're going to go to invert right there at the bottom. And it's going to invert, and it's going to choose everything inside of those lines. Right? It's going to invert the actual background. So now I have a really good, strong selection for this the paint layer. So we're going to pick a color, and I thought this color was too dark, and I wanted him because he's going to be a wrestler, like a cheesy little wrestler, over the top wrestler. So I basically went with like a kind of like a tanned look, you know. And then now we're doing the trunks. We're doing a selection on his trunks. I just went ahead and did a regular selection on his trunks, and we're gonna pick a pink color right here. I thought I was just going over the top, so I love this pink color right here. So we're just adding a little light direction on our paint layer, and we're going into step 3. And what we're doing right here is we're gonna add a clipping mask layer. And we're gonna try linear burn right now. And I know a lot of artists use linear burn, but you know, to be honest, I think it's too saturated, and you can change that in the opacity layer. But look at that, I think it's a little bit too dark, because we're only using the base color of his, you know, what his body is already, you know, the bottom layer. We're using that color, and then we're just adding the linear burn. But I chose multiply, which is right here, because I just prefer that more. So remember, we're on the clipping mask, so that's not going to affect the paint layer under. So there are several ways to go about painting like the shadows in, and you can use the select tool, or you know, the lasso if you use Photoshop, or me personally, I do both, and it depends on what you want to use it for. So right here, I'm basically just kind of brushing it in. I'm using a certain type of brush. And here's the thing, you can use any type of brush, because what I like to do is I like to alter it by using the erase tool. You see what I'm doing right here? As I'm just coming in and I'm just using the erase tool, and I'm just erasing what I don't want. And that's what you're going to be doing, is you're going to be erasing what you just painted on the multiply layer. So on the multiply layer, you're going to be erasing what you just brushed in, just to kind of, you know, just to perfect that shadow, depending on the shapes that you're using in your painting. So right here, we're going to paint under his chin a little bit. I think we use the select tool right here. Here we go. And I'm showing you how you would do that with the select tool. Remember, you can just paint on it right on the layer, or you can choose to do it a certain way and select certain shapes, and then go back over that and erase what you don't want with the eraser tool. So I'm gonna do that right now. Just kind of throw that in there, and you know, see how it looks a little jagged. I really don't like that. Sometimes you don't get the result you want. So you can also go in with a brush and kind of change that way. So, but what I do is I think I erase a little bit right here, and just change those edges, you know what I mean? Smooth them out. You see how I smooth that out? It just looks so much better now, because sometimes the select tool is just, I don't think there's really a feathering feature. I could be wrong, but I don't know if that would really make a difference in this case. I don't really mess around with the feathering feature in Procreate. I used to in Photoshop, but I've basically become almost exclusively a Procreate user now. So I'm just adding in these layers, and I think I'm basically sped up this area right here, and I'm just doing it with a brush. I'm just adding in these little shapes with the brush, and sometimes you get the exact shapes and you know, shadows that you want. Sometimes you don't even need to add, you know, take away with an eraser, or you know, use a different brush. It just comes out, you know, the way you want it sometimes. And a lot of times, and more often than not, it doesn't. It just, you know, it can be frustrating sometimes. But it's you know, it's trial and error. Everything is trial and error. You're not going to get it right the first time. And there's another thing, is you need to understand your forms when you're doing this. You need to understand the anatomy. Just because you can draw the anatomy, do you understand the forms, you know, that's going on? Because obviously this is not 3D. This is 2D. You're not seeing it at different angles. You're only seeing it at one angle. So you really have to understand these forms in order to get accurate looking shadows, you know, at the very least. Yeah, we're just making sure we're keeping true to the light direction and the forms. Yeah, and see here I'm just kind of slightly changing those brush strokes to kind of match the anatomy. And then we kind of skipped ahead, and I didn't feel it was necessary to show you the whole process because, you know, I just stuck to the forms like I was talking about. And now we're going to paint the shorts. And I think the upper body area really came out well. I thought, you know, just for a tutorial, I thought I really enjoyed this piece, and I really enjoyed doing it. I just love working in the anime cell shaded style. I didn't always do this. I don't want to say I was always against it, but yeah, I love it. And so right here, I was having trouble with just doing it with a brush. And so I use a selection tool, and you can do that sometimes. Is pick out a section if you want to get those sharp angles or those sharp edges, and I erased out the multiply layer. And here I am just altering that a little bit. And again, you can always choose to go over it with either the selection tool or the brush. It's up to you. I mean, there's probably other ways, but it's just like, you know, getting the shapes right. And then right here, I add a little bit of yellow. I thought it was yellow and pink that just really went together. It was a little like kind of 80-ish, 80s style. So I figured, you know, why not miss the chance to do it? If you're going to do a wrestler, you might as well do it in the 80s, right? Just something like this with the face paint and whatnot. I thought that looked really good. So here we are. We're just selecting it in the regular way. And using the selection tool, use a selection tool to fill out a lot of your big areas. Again, I mean, when we're using a digital medium, you know, treat it like a digital, you know, tool. Like, you know, don't do it like you would do it traditional. Like, why? You know, if you're using traditional, you have no choice but to use it that way. You know. So I changed the hair curves right here to make it lighter because I thought it was a little bit too dark. So here we are, just going with a brush, and but I thought it was necessary for me to use a selection tool to get a few highlights right here in his hair. And here we go. I just kind of, you know, really just pick out a few areas and erase part of that multiply layer where I made the blue darker, and just erase that out, and then it exposes the paint layer under, right? And I fixed that a little bit, always paying attention to the light direction. And of course, we're going for you know, color consistency and kind of little color relationships, making sure that everything looks good together. And I used that pink for his face paint, his war paint, and just added a little bit of shadow to make it look a little bit more dramatic. So there you go, guys. There's only 3 major steps. It's the line art, it's the paint layer under, and it's the adding either a add or multiply layer, depending on whether you're adding light or you're adding shadow. Alright guys, that about does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you want to see next in the comments down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.